Almost up, almost loaded. There we go. All right. Excuse me. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining me as we begin a new segment. This is going to be a two-part class. We're going to be talking about Shabbat. Shabbat is one of the most beautiful gifts that we have been given through Torah. It is something that has been in different forms embraced by a majority of the people on the world, and it is a critical part of both our spiritual and psychological well-being. As such, it's going to take a lot of time to get through everything we need to do. But as always, everything we do is not everything there is to learn, understand, and know about Shabbat. That is a lifelong project. We're going to start by talking about the aspects of Shabbat that we add in order to enhance our understanding, our remembrance, our joy, our honor of Shabbat, many different ways. So with that, let's get underway. So when we look at the commandment for Shabbat and look at it in the long form, we'll see that one of the versions of the Ten Commandments reads, "Observe Shabbat and keep it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Shabbat of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or your ass, or any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlements, so that your male and female slave may rest as you do. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to do Shabbat." So the thing to understand about Shabbat is that while it is technically a noun, and a noun that has become a proper noun, referring not just to the seventh day of the week, but to the particular attitude of that day, is that Shabbat is ultimately a verb. Shabbat comes from the root meaning to cease, to desist, to take a break. And so the fundamental idea of Shabbat, of a cessation, is built into it. However, that aspect, the cessation of Shabbat, is something that we will talk about more next week. For today, we want to talk about the things that we do to enhance Shabbat, the additions of Shabbat, the remembrances of Shabbat. Now, what do I mean by that word? Well, we get two different versions of the Ten Commandments. We see in the first version, given in Exodus, the word Zachor is used, meaning remember Shabbat. Whereas in the second version of the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy, we see the word Shamor, which means to keep or guard Shabbat. Now, according to the Talmud, this is not a discrepancy. It's not that the copyist of the Torah didn't realize that the word changed between Exodus and Deuteronomy and made a mistake, but instead, both of these words were pronounced in a single utterance, an utterance which the mouth cannot utter, but nor the ear can hear. So God made a statement of both Zachor and Shamor in a simultaneous way, reflecting that each are equally important to our full experience of Shabbat. And this penetrates into us and through Jewish law that Shabbat must have both elements. Now, like I said, the Shamor, the keeping or observance of Shabbat by our limitations, is going to be the topic for next week. But the Zachor, coming first as it does in the order of the books of the Torah, is the remembrance of Shabbat. And in this way, remembering means to show respect, to show honor, to enhance the experience of the day so that it is different than other days of the week. And that will be our focus tonight. So as we often do, we turn to Rambam's Mishnah Torah to get a little bit of a summary. And as he explains, there are 4 elements to Shabbat, 2 originating in the Torah and 2 originating in the words of our sages, which are given exposition by the prophets. In the Torah are the commandments, remember and observe, Zachor and Shamor, like we just discussed. Given exposition by the prophets are honor, kavod, and delight, oneh. As Isaiah 58:13 says, if you refrain from trampling Shabbat, from pursuing your affairs on my holy day, if you call Shabbat delight, oneg, the Lord's holy day honored, kavod, and if you honor it and go not your ways, nor look to your affairs. And of course, Isaiah continues to talk about the importance of this aspect. Now, the sages understood that both honoring and delighting in Shabbat are implied within the Torah itself, but are made explicit through the words of Isaiah. As such, we have really three elements to work on tonight. The elements that give honor to Shabbat, the elements that give us delight on Shabbat, and the elements that we do as a form of remembering, of being mindful of the essence of Shabbat. And we will look at all three in turn. So let's begin with honor, or kavod, as it is known in Hebrew. And you will often see on many items made for Shabbat the phrase lichvod, meaning for the honor of Shabbat. But what is meant by honor, says Rambam? This refers to our sage's statement that it is a mitzvah for a person to wash his face, his hands, and his feet in hot water on Friday in honor of Shabbat, meaning before Shabbat begins. He should wrap himself in tzitzit, meaning the talit, and sit with proper respect, waiting to receive Shabbat as one goes out to greet a king. So we see right here a very simple template, a way of formulating our understanding of honoring Shabbat, that we should treat Shabbat as an honored guest. Unlike any other day of the week, when Shabbat is approaching, meaning when the time of Shabbat draws near, we should take steps that would be identical as if we were going to be greeting a king or a person of great importance, or indeed a loved one that we hadn't seen for a very long time. We would clean ourselves up. We would wipe off all of the dirt, the schmutz, and the feet, especially when you lived in the era of sandals. And we would prepare ourselves, because if the king was showing up, we wouldn't go out to see him looking like we were still filthy. We would have taken time to prepare. And so too for the honor of Shabbat, we prepare ourselves in that way. The sages of the former generations, in fact, would gather their students together on Friday, wrap themselves in fine robes, and say, "Come, let us go out and greet Shabbat the king." This is something that has been immortalized in the Kabbalat Shabbat section of the service, which we talked about earlier. And this is something that has been immortalized very distinctly in the poem song Lecha Dodi, Likrat Shabbat, to go out and greet Shabbat. Among the ways of honoring Shabbat is wearing a clean garment. One's garments should not resemble one's weekday clothes. Now, you might have heard the expression of wearing your Sunday best, well, this is where it came from. The idea of wearing our nicest things when we are on Shabbat is a way of showing honor and respect to Shabbat. And of course, it changes how we feel emotionally as well. If you have ever had the experience of getting dressed up for a wedding, for going to see a special performance in maybe the theater or an orchestra, or even just having a special meal together with a loved one, you'll know that dressing in your nicest clothes, preparing yourself in the finest ways, puts you in a certain frame of mind. It emotionally prepares you for that encounter, for that experience. And to do otherwise, to show up in your dirty clothes from working in the garden, or clothes that are a little bit stinky maybe from the day, clothes that you wouldn't wear if it really mattered to you, emotionally puts us at a disadvantage for being able to experience. There have been times in my life when either greeting someone or indeed for Shabbat, I was not always able to prepare myself properly, to have that wash up and to put on what I wanted. And whether it was meeting somebody that I respected or meeting Shabbat, I always felt that it was a little bit, I was unprepared, that it was not as good as it should be in that experience. How we prepare ourselves makes a difference to the experience we will eventually have. Now, if you don't have the finest of fine clothes, well, obviously neither do I. I don't shop on Rodeo Drive. I don't buy the fanciest of suits. But within each person's means, whatever it is that would be appropriate for them. If it is what they would wear to meet somebody special, then they should be wearing something like that for Shabbat as well. And yes, I know the temptation to relax on Shabbat, even when coming to services or engaging in tefillot and our prayers, is very tempting, because many of us are working very hard the other 6 days of the week. However, the same can also be said for meeting somebody that would be important. And yet, almost everybody would take the extra effort to wear something perhaps not quite as comfortable, but certainly that makes them feel more prepared for a special event when they are about to have what they consider a special event. So too with Shabbat. Put every effort into it that you can, within the limits of your budget and the limits of your time, to prepare yourself for Shabbat as though you were having a special event. And I guarantee it will make Shabbat feel much more special than it does if you are a little bit more lackadaisical in your preparations. Now, the flip side of honoring Shabbat, flip is probably the wrong side, the companion of honoring Shabbat is to also find ways to enjoy Shabbat. It is not just about putting on an uncomfortable suit and tie that you don't like wearing. It is also about doing things that you will like. Again, taken from Rambam, a person must prepare a particularly tasty meal and a pleasantly flavored drink for Shabbat. All of them must be done within the context of a person's financial status. The more one expends for Shabbat and in the preparation of many good foods, the more praiseworthy it is, again, within your status. If, however, this is not within one's capacity, meaning financially or by time you don't have the ability to cook a 5-course meal for Friday night because you and the rest of your family are working so hard, even if one merely stews food, a simple form of cooking in the ancient world and even today, or the like in honor of Shabbat, this is considered to be Shabbat delight, to be oneh. By doing something a little different, a little better than the average of what you might have during the rest of the week, that alone is going to add a little extra spark of joy and pleasure to the time of Shabbat. And we want to associate Shabbat with those joys, with those special feelings and feelings from the body, the senses themselves. One is not obligated to strain oneself or to borrow from others in order to prepare more food for Shabbat. The sages of the former generation said, make your Shabbat as weekdays, but do not depend on others. So yes, unfortunately now as we are going through the throes of inflation and many people are struggling to make ends meet, by all means, do not overextend yourself for the celebration of Shabbat. And given how expensive kosher meat can be, that is something that has to be done carefully. It is better to have a nice but budgeted celebration of Shabbat than to add to the stress and the worry by overextending a credit card for the preparation. Also on Shabbat, sexual relations are considered a dimension of Shabbat pleasure. It is not obligatory by any stretch of the imagination, but the pleasure that comes from intimacy with a loving partner is something that should be considered a fine addition to Shabbat. Shabbat may have a feel of otherworldliness to it, and certainly as we remember Shabbat and seek to tap into that spirituality, it's important to recognize that there is more to this world, the created world from the 6 days, and Shabbat gives us that access. But we are also meant to celebrate Shabbat, to have the delight of Shabbat with the benefits of this created world, whether it be a fine meal or whether it be the company of a loved one. So we are not seeking to escape the pleasures of the world. We are seeking to contextualize them, to frame them as part of our celebration of Shabbat. Any questions or comments? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this delight and the institution of what's known as Seudah Shlishit, or Shalshudus, as you'll hear some people say in a more Yiddish type accent. So a person is obligated to eat 3 meals on Shabbat, 1 in the evening, 1 in the morning, and 1 in the afternoon. As we know from the book of Exodus, and Moses said when talking about the manna that was being received by the people and their instructions to not try to gather any on Shabbat, eat it today, for today is Shabbat, Shabbat to the Lord, today you will not find it in the field. Those 3 mentions of today, the Yom, is considered to be an allusion to the 3 meals on Shabbat. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, but Rabbi, I eat 3 meals every day. What's so special about this? Well, lucky you for living in the 21st century. Historically, that was not always the case. Historically, that was not always even possible. People in the ancient world ate 2 meals on an average day. And so that 3rd meal was a bonus meal and meant to be a special edition on Shabbat. Nowadays, one should still have the 3 meals, of course, within the boundaries of Shabbat, meaning from the sunset on Friday until prior to Havdalah on Saturday night, which can be a little tricky in the winter in the northern latitudes. But those 3 meals should be seen as being a special celebration. Even if you are accustomed to being well-fed and enjoying your food, find something that is a special treat on Shabbat. Find something that will make it a little bit extra in your enjoyment. I, for one, I've always advocated for Shabbat being the time when we are not counting calories, when we are not so incredibly careful about watching what we eat. Of course, it should still be within the boundaries of health and avoiding gluttony. But if you eat well on 6 days of the week on Shabbat, allow yourself to indulge in ways that add to the enjoyment of the day.
Question.
Yes.
The dinner on the Shabbat, is that take place before you light the candles or after?
It is usually best to be done after we light the candles, which is what we're going to talk about right now, because having the candles help illuminate that meal is a very pleasant addition. If it gets a little more complicated, with different members of the family often arriving home at different times, then contact me and we can talk about ways to juggle the different aspects of Shabbat together with the different schedules of family members. But in general, it is nice to light first and then to eat, as long as everyone in the family is synchronized in their time for accepting Shabbat, for the beginning of Shabbat. So let's talk about that candle lighting, because this is perhaps one of the most iconic aspects of Shabbat. You can't really see a movie where Jews make an appearance and not expect to have somebody lighting candles at some scene during the film. Well, what is going on here? Again, taken from Rambam, the kindling of a Shabbat lamp is not a matter left to our choice, meaning to only do it if you want. Nor is it a mitzvah that we are not obligated to pursue, meaning you should do it, but you don't have to make it possible. Nope, this is a mitzvah that you really must try to make possible. Instead, it is an obligation. That's a little legal talk at the beginning here, because there were debates about whether or not we have to light the candles of Shabbat, whether we have to try and make a situation where we can. And as Rambam is summarizing here for the vast majority of Jewish law, yes, this is a mitzvah that we need to put the effort into making it happen. If it's not possible, it's not possible. But there needs to be a legitimate attempt. Now, both men and women are obligated to have a lamp lit in their homes on Shabbat. This is something that people get confused about. It may be customary to have the women light the candles on Shabbat, and that's a very nice custom and a way of honoring women that is thousands of years old. However, if a man is a bachelor living all on his own, he still will light candles for himself. If there are only men in the house, a father and a son, they will still light candles, even if there are no women around. It is not a woman's mitzvah, even if it is customary to allow the woman to have the first right of doing so, the first honor of doing so. Likewise, when we talk about Kiddush as well, even though that custom is often given to a man to perform, it is absolutely obligated for a woman to do it as well if she is living by herself, or if women are living together and there is no man to give that honor to. Even if a person does not have food to eat, he should beg from door to door and purchase oil to kindle a lamp, for this is included in the oneg of Shabbat. We'll come back to that in just a second, but I want to finish with our idea of the blessing. One is obligated to recite a blessing before lighting, as one does before fulfilling any of the obligations incumbent upon us by virtue of rabbinic decree. So some of the other mitzvot that are by rabbinic decree that you might be familiar with are such things as the blessing over washing our hands before eating from bread, and the blessing before lighting the candles of Hanukkah. Now, why is the lighting so important? Well, the lighting is considered to be reflective of joy, for darkness is not something that causes a lot of rejoicing in most communities. And remembering in the ancient world, when the sun went down, light was gone unless you made it with oil, or then later with candles. And that could cause a lot of problems. Stumbling around the home in the dark could cause, well, not just stubbed toes, but also hurt feelings and frustration. So having a lamp that was lit before Shabbat began, because as we'll talk about next week, you can't light it once Shabbat has begun, was a very important part of protecting that joy. As Rambam mentioned, there is a blessing that we recite, which is recited as follows. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Translated roughly is, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us, made us holy with his commandments, and has commanded us to kindle the light or the flame of Shabbat. And of course, there are different endings if we are lighting candles for Yom Tov, where it would be Lahadlik Ner Shel Yom Tov, or if we were lighting candles for Hanukkah, where it would be Lahadlik Ner Shel Chanukah. In those same movies where they always want to show a Jewish person lighting candles, you will often see people waving their hands over the candles and then covering their eyes as they recite the blessing. This is technically a custom, but there isn't an explicit source which tells us exactly why this is going on. However, there are many of different explanations and things that we can meditate on as we are following this custom. So one is that this triple wave, as it is, allows us to focus our thought before saying the blessing. And the action of the waving of our hands from the candles towards us is a symbolic representation of drawing in that spirit of Shabbat. Now, as I mentioned, most people will wave 3 times, and many people see in this a parallel to the 3 parts of the soul, the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama, with the idea that we are celebrating Shabbat with every aspect of ourself, with every part of ourself, from the most primitive of animating spirits to the most lofty and elevated elements of our soul. There is also a practical aspect for the waving and blessing being done in that order. And that is to say that in Jewish law, we always say the blessing before we do an action. Now, This would seem backwards then in our current custom of lighting and then saying a blessing, because, well, isn't it, didn't the lighting happen before we made the blessing? Instead, the idea here is that by covering our eyes, we are, and then saying the blessing, we are then going to enjoy the light when the hands are removed, and that will put the blessing before the actual seeing of the candles themselves. This also is sort of a little bit of a buffer time, that by lighting the candles and then covering our eyes, we are putting a moment of pause between the beginning of Shabbat and our blessing of those candles, rather than going straight into it. So this is a beautiful moment of peace and joy for households as this welcoming part of Shabbat takes place. And that peace and joy is really a big part of, like I said, of having this lamp lit in the first place. As the Talmud says, said Rabbah, it is clear to me that if someone can't afford both and has to choose between a lamp for his house and a lamp for Hanukkah, the lamp for his house takes precedence for Shalom Bayit. If he has to choose between a lamp for his house and wine for saying a prayer of sanctification, meaning the Kiddush of a holy day, a lamp for his house takes precedence for Shalom Bayit. Shalom Bayit means the peace or harmony of the home. And the idea is, as I mentioned earlier, that without light in the house, the residents are more likely to not be enjoying a peaceful time. This is also, of course, metaphorical as well as literal, as anybody who's been in a blackout can attest. But metaphorically, it also means that on Shabbat, we should see that special light. We should use that special effort of being able to see another person clearly and visibly, to experience that time together with a full illumination. The second part that comes in this beginning of Shabbat, the welcoming of Shabbat, is what's called the Kiddush. This act of remembrance of Zachor is incredibly powerful. As Rambam says, it is a positive commandment from the Torah to sanctify the Shabbat day with a verbal statement, as it is implied by Exodus 28, meaning the 10 Commandments. Remember Shabbat, remember the Shabbat day to sanctify it, meaning remember it in a way, meaning with words or with praise, that will declare its holiness. So this is our Kiddush, this is our sanctification of the day. This remembrance must be made at Shabbat's entrance and at its departure. At the entrance with Kiddush, that sanctifies the day, and at its departure with Havdalah, the ceremony for the conclusion of Shabbat, where likewise we have a cup of wine, and we proclaim that Shabbat is different than the other days of the week. So we welcome Shabbat as she comes, and we escort Shabbat to say goodbye to her as she departs. The translation of the blessing is as follows. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine, the blessing over any time we drink wine. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with his commandments, and hoped for us, and with love and intent invested us with his sacred Shabbat as a memorial, a zecher, a reminder to the deed of creation. It is the first among the holy festivals. Indeed, whenever the Torah is listing holidays, Shabbat will always be at the top of the list, commemorating the exodus from Egypt. For you chose us and sanctified us out of all the nations, and with love and intent you invested us with your holy Shabbat. This is a unique treasure that we have been asked to preserve. Blessed are you, Adonai, sanctifier of Shabbat. You'll notice in this Kiddush, in the typical elegant brevity, that the twin themes of Shabbat are highlighted so beautifully. The theme of redemption, the freedom that comes from Egypt, Indeed, it is only a slave who has to work 7 days a week for the nations of the world, but a truly free person should be able to take at least 1 day off and not have to toil. And in the modern world where many people work sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, I know that isn't always possible. But remember that the full expression of our humanity does not come through our occupation, but it comes through our own spiritual endeavor. Also, of course, as it mentions, Shabbat is a celebration of creation. Shabbat is not the opposite of creation. It is not 6 days versus 1. It is 6 days of creation and 1 day of full and deep appreciation for creation. We are not trying to escape or distance ourselves from creation. We are trying to sit back and to truly marvel at everything that God created and everything that we have done in the week prior, and recognize that it is enough that we can rest on this day. My throat's a little scratchy with some allergies today, but let's see if I can give a version of the blessing for the Kiddush, in case you wish to review. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho me'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh zecher l'tziyat mitzrayim kivanu v'chata ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. And then we will take a drink from the cup of wine. As a reminder, if you haven't heard me say this in prior classes, for anyone that cannot drink wine, it is perfectly fine to use kosher grape juice for the Kiddush as well. Now, putting all of this into perspective, bringing all of this sort of together, we have to see that Shabbat is an amazingly important part of Jewish understanding. Shabbat is held up as being one of the linchpins, the keystone of Jewish life. As it says in the Torah itself, "How long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws?" And it is written, "See, the Lord has given you Shabbat. Therefore, on the 6 days gives you bread. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days." And the prophets, "But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes, and my Shabbats they greatly profaned." And then in the writings, in Ketuvim, "You came down upon Mount Sinai and spoke with them from heaven and gave them right ordinances and true laws, good statutes and commandments, and you made known to them your holy Shabbat." You'll notice from each of these 3 sections, Torah, prophets, and writings, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, that there are explanations of God's commanding to us that put all of the commandments as a bundle and then single out Shabbat. And that is trying to highlight that while Shabbat is not equal to all of the commandments in a literal sense, if you keep Shabbat, you don't get to murder someone. It is spiritually a prism through which all of the other commandments can be made manifest and whole. Shabbat is something that, when kept properly in both the observance that we're talking about today, as well as the observance from next week, that we are connected to, on the track to, finding a link to every other aspect of the commandedness of the sanctification that God is looking for. Shabbat really is the gateway. And I know from many people that I have talked with over the years that their introduction or reintroduction to Judaism often comes through the doorway of Shabbat. It is often the portal that leads them to deepen their appreciation and their connection to everything else that Judaism has to offer. As we've seen a number of times, the theme of Shabbat is referenced often to the connection of manna. As we see here in Brachot 39b in the Talmud, Rabbi Abba said, and on Shabbat, one is obligated to break over 2 loaves. What is the reason? Twice as much bread, the manna, that was given. So when we are preparing our Shabbat meals, we have 2 loaves of bread. They don't have to be big. Often for my family, we use very small challah rolls, but the double portion is a reminder of God's double support before Shabbat, specifically in the manna that took place during our time in the Sinai wilderness, but also just metaphorically, that we experience a double portion of blessing, that God has given us enough that we don't need to toil on Shabbat. Now, I know sometimes that's not always true, but it should be the goal for us individually, as well as for us as a society, to make sure that everyone can have enough from 6 days of work, that on Shabbat, they will be able to also have enough. Really, it is shanda, as we say, it's a shame that our society does not always afford everybody the opportunity to be able to earn their bread for 7 days with 6 days of work. As it says in Shulchan Aruch, one breaks bread on 2 whole loaves that one holds, then you eat from the lower one. This is in the evening, but in the day and on other holidays, one takes from the upper loaf. This is in accordance with Kabbalah. So Rabbi Caro here is trying to hint at the idea that as we hold the loaves, we might hold them one above the other, and in the evening, we are feeling more in tune with the feminine side of God's presence, what we call the Shekhinah, and thus we take from the lower loaf as a reference to the, shall we say, stereotypical positioning of the woman in the imagination of the past. And then on the morning, when we are connected more to Malchut, to God's sovereignty, we take from the upper loaf. This is an interesting way of meditating as we eat from the bread when we make the motzi. It is perfectly fine to also put the 2 loaves side by side, although I would still recommend eating from the leftmost for the evening and the rightmost for the morning, as a way of still referencing the different ways that we experience and connect to God in the evening and the morning parts of Shabbat celebration. But wait, there's more. In Shabbat, in the evening in particular, there are a couple other things that are customary. The first is to do a blessing for our children. It is customary to place one's hands on the head of the child and to recite the standard blessings that we give. If it is our girl, we would say, may God make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. If it is a boy, we say, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. And for either a boy or a girl, we add the priestly blessing. May God bless you and guard you. May God shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May God lift his face to you and give you peace. It is also customary to recite Eshet Chayil, which is Proverbs 31. It's in English called a woman of valor. It is a poem that is recited in honor and in praise of the wife, of the woman of the house, as an exemplar. And if you read through Proverbs 31, you'll understand that the praise is very robust, indeed very modern, with a woman that is not a shrinking violet, but a strong and good person, not only moral and upright, but understanding and helpful, and very industrious in ways that seem very businesslike. For indeed, women have always had that role in society. It's a very modern notion that women don't engage in commerce, that That's not the classical view. There's a very famous quote by Ahad Aham that I'd like to finish with. This is one of the more modern Israeli authors. More than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. The symmetry in the Hebrew here is really trying to say that, yes, we keep Shabbat, we guard Shabbat, we are observant of Shabbat, but that same word for keeping, guarding, and keeping Shabbat in an observance way can also mean to protect. Now, Shabbat does not need our physical protection, but Shabbat does provide a protection to us. Shabbat provides an emotional time when we can be free from the pressures and demands of the world around us. Shabbat provides a time when we can be in deep connection with our own spiritual side, again, without the trouble of the daily life that can often distract us. Shabbat provides an opportunity to rekindle friendships and relationships, to deepen our understanding of the people who are part of our life. Shabbat provides an essential aspect for study and learning and enriching ourselves in the ways of our people. Shabbat as a commandment is very powerful, but Shabbat as an effect is even more powerful. And without this commandment, if we can imagine God not having commanded it, but without this commandment, it is very possible that the Jewish people would not have been able to survive. This weekly opportunity to refresh, to rejuvenate, if you'll pardon the pun, has been essential throughout the millennia that we have lived through. And as such, if you do not already make Shabbat an important and joyful part of your life, use some of what we have done here and study more from the additional resources I've mentioned earlier in the class, back in our first episode, and find ways to make Shabbat even richer. As far as the limitations of Shabbat, which I actually consider to be the liberations of Shabbat, that we will discuss next week. But before we go, are there any questions or additional comments that people have? All right, then we will wrap it up for today. I hope everybody is doing well, and a little bit early, Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy that piece of Shabbat when it comes tomorrow night